Men in the Arena Army, we salute you. Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the Men in the Arena podcast. This is an Average Joe episode, but guys, remember the caveat. These guys are not average Joes. They're average in the sense that they know an average guy and live in the same town as this average bobblehead. But these guys are crushing it in life. Today I've got my friend on here, BJ. Some know him as Ben Sullivan. He owns his own electrical business with dozens of employees. He's been married to his beautiful bride, Sarah, for almost 26 years. He's got two wonderful children. BJ was on the very first board of directors that we had for Men in the Arena. He was in the friend role, which, as you remember, is from 1 Kings 4:5, and Zabud was the king's friend when Solomon chose his cabinet. So to protect our ministry against anything that would hurt us and my own integrity, because I know what I'm capable of, we've always had a friend role on the board of directors, and that was BJ. I've known BJ since 2009. He confronted me in a coffee shop about coaching football. I confronted him back. We coached together, had a phenomenal season, and we just have become dear, dear friends. We actually share bread every Sunday. We are in the same home group together, and so it's great to have you on the podcast today, brother.
Well, thank you.
Did I forget anything?
No, you're good.
Okay, so help me out here. So all I've ever known is BJ, but I know that you like people to call you with Ben, and not just for my own curiosity. I kind of have an idea what this is about, but why Ben versus BJ?
Yeah, so you'll remember when I was about 20 years old, I had wrecked my life. Mm-hmm. I was homeless, familyless, moneyless. I had become addicted to drugs and really had just flushed the entire future of my life down the toilet. And by God's grace, I woke up one day and realized I needed to make a change. And so I was able to get myself into an inpatient drug and alcohol therapy program. And while I was in there, going through these really intense, therapeutic, psychiatric sessions of really trying to unpack all of this stuff that got me to where I was. The counselor that I was working with, he asked me, why do you go by BJ? That's what I've always gone by. It's my initials. My name's Benjamin James, and that's just what I've always gone by. And he said, it's probably a good time to maybe make a real change, and part of that is, maybe going by your given name. And so it's kind of an interesting identifier, like when we're out, which I respond organically to both.
Yeah, totally.
I don't really make a differentiation. I typically don't introduce myself as BJ, but the sort of rules that I created around it is anybody in my life that was part of my inner circle, I wanted that to stay, because the name is the name, it's the man, and the changes I were making weren't because I was going by Ben now. That was just some signal of what I was trying to do. So I didn't worry about too much. People in my life still call me BJ, but you can tell people that I've met since then. There's a cutoff in my life where you can tell people that I met after that point where I introduced myself as Ben and they only know me as Ben. You would have been one of those people that because of our friendship and you being brought into my inner circle, you were rubbing elbows with my wife and my family, and they all call me BJ. Yeah. So it's natural for you to call me that, and it's natural for me to answer to it. But it's kind of a neat thing when you really think about it, about how much of a change there was between BJ and whatever BJ was into Ben.
You know what's funny? Wednesday night, I ran into a guy, and I said, "When'd you graduate?" And he said, 19. He was talking about playing football in high school. And I said, "Oh, where'd you go to high school?" He said, "McMinnville." And I go, "Oh, when'd you graduate?" He said, 94. And I go, "Oh, do you know BJ Sullivan?" He goes, "Oh, yeah. We were afraid of that guy. He was mean."
Who was it?
I'm not going to tell you.
Oh, okay.
But I was like, "Yeah, that's not the guy. He's not the same guy anymore. He's a follows Jesus." And they're like, "Oh." But they were like, "Oh." And then I had another guy that I serve on the Young Life Committee with. He went to high school. They're like, "Oh, that guy was scary." And you know who that guy is. He's a dentist here in town. And so, and I'm like, "Yeah, he's not that guy anymore." So it's really funny. Anyway, it's just fun to kind of know the name. Like people from my past call me Jimmy. Like my mom calls me Jimmy. My friends from childhood. It's funny how that changes. Anyway, Has nothing to do with today's episode. But what's on your mind, man? What's going on?
Well, it's kind of funny that we're sitting where we're at. I know that like where you've recorded and those types of things, that has sort of moved around. But I was telling Daniel when we walked in, it's been a long time since I've been in this church. It's been a long time. And I've been down in the foundry and for fundraisers and those types of things, but coming to a church service here, it's been a long time. And you know, some of that is not just based upon this church. You know that I'm not a pastor in the pulpit kind of guy. And that's always been for the last, say, 12 years. That's been a little bit of a challenge for me in trying to be the best version of myself, trying to be the best example I can for my kids, leading my wife correctly. I've been struggling with my lack of affinity for going to a church, going to a building, being part of that. And so I guess the stuff that I wanted to unpack with you today is the best version of a biblical man. Does that guy need to be going to a church on Sunday?
That's funny. I just did a podcast on that. So the short answer is yes. So the key is we need to define what church looks like. So there are a lot of guys, a lot of you listening are in BJ's situation. He serves a lot, gives a lot, loves a lot, all these things. And so I think, and you and I have had this go around for quite a while now. I did not think you were going to bring this up. I thought we beat this one to death and just kind of parted ways. But let's talk about this, because I would argue that you do go to church. So let's talk about this. Before we talk about going to church, which I'm a huge advocate for the church, let's talk about what a church is. So what is, Jesus said, well, I guess let's lay the biblical foundation. Yeah. Jesus said, after Judas, so today's Good Friday. So Good Friday, 2,000 years ago, Jesus is in an upper room. He sends Judas out to betray him after he washes Judas's feet. Critical for us as Christians. How do we handle an enemy? He sends him out, and he looks around and he says, John 13, 34 and 35, he says, this is how they, non-Christians, will know that you're my disciples, if you love one another. To me, that was the call to the church. So we know in 1 Corinthians 12, 1 Corinthians 14, we talk about the church as many parts, and we just kind of we talk about Ephesians chapter 10. Now, rewind, talk about, I'm just laying a foundation biblically here, and then we'll get into this, because I think we're on more of the same page than you think. Hebrews 10, 23 and 24, let us consider how we may spur one another on to love and good deeds. Let us not forsake the gathering together, as some are in the habit of doing. Okay, so the question is, if we believe church is important, or if I believe church is important, and I think you do too, you have to define church. What is church? I just defined it in another episode like 30 minutes ago. Yeah, I just talked about this. So we have to define church. Like, do you have a definition of church? When you say you don't want to go to church, or you don't have an affinity to church, what is that? Like, how do you define that word?
So that's where, and I try not to get in arguments about it, because I think I still am pretty open-minded to things. I obviously have had some bad experiences with the brick and mortar building and the dude standing at the pulpit. But I'm also like not an excuse guy. So it's like, yeah, so that happened. Why am I letting that affect the next dozen years of my spiritual growth in some form or fashion? To me, that's weak sauce. I guess I struggle with the idea, which a lot of the references you made, I know of, the Hebrews 10 one, where he's saying, let's get together and spur each other on. That to me is like, that points very clearly to the idea of church. Yeah. The idea of a brick and mortar building and a dude standing there may or may not being fake and putting on some charade, I don't think that that's a biblical context. And so it's not like when I don't have an affinity for it, it's not like I'm saying church is wrong. I'm saying biblically, I'm not 100% certain that it says that's what church is. And I guarantee you, if that's the only thing you're doing, then you're definitely not hitting the mark as far as what church is.
I think you and I would agree that the mega church model is greatly missing. The Sunday morning mega church model is not hitting the mark at all. I think you and I have evolved to a point that we probably agree on this issue a lot more than you probably think you agree with me when you walked into the room. And so, but we still haven't defined, well, you defined what church isn't. You said church isn't brick and mortar, one guy preaching. So what is church?
I think for me, it's community. I think church is fellowship. I think in some form or fashion, this is church.
Define that. I'm trying to see how many points you're hitting here. You got fellowship and community.
Yeah, fellowship, community. I think when we're biblically based, when we're breaking down the word.
Sitting at the apostles' teaching, we read about in Acts 2, verses 44 and 45, somewhere in there.
Yeah. I think there's a worship element to church.
Worship.
And I think there's a prayer element.
Prayer.
And for me, I do a lot of that, right? So this thing that I'm wrestling with is not like, man, I'm missing the mark. That's not what I'm wrestling with as a man. I'm wrestling with, if I'm truly trying to live my life for Christ, and I'm truly trying to reflect all of the goodness, all of the love, all of the grace, all of the mercy, daily working through that, daily in prayer, daily in the Word, if I'm truly trying to live that way, where does going to a church and being part of a church body fit into that, to where I'm not taking away from the reflection of what God's doing in my life? Mm-hmm. And so that's the wrestle, because, not to make it all about me, but just saying, like, how much I serve. That I go to Mexico and I work in orphanages and I volunteer my time, or any volunteer activity with any of the ministries around here that I'll support. I'll be the first one to raise my hand, and that's through effort, not just finances or writing a check, like doing the work.
You model that.
Yeah, and so it's not that, like, I'm not living out the gospel or living out trying to build the kingdom. It's, why is there this notion that I guess I'm somewhat resilient against, that in order to be that man, to be that biblical guy, why is there this notion that you have to be a member at some congregation somewhere and have that be the activity from which, all of your service, finances, love, community, why does it have to go through that? Why is there this notion out there? And I'm contrarian a lot in my thought. I'll challenge a lot of things just because I want to do what's biblically sound. And for me, you brought up a lot of good points in the Word, but none of them point to a brick and mortar. None of them point to standing there listening to a guy.
Understand 100%. So it's really interesting. Okay, so let me go back a couple steps. I got in an argument with my old pastor from, when I was single, about church, because he had left the church, resigned, and did his own thing, a parachurch ministry, but he talked about church as franchise church, and membership is a franchise thing. That's not a biblical thing. That's a 501c3 thing. Buildings, I don't think, are in the Bible. We don't see that as a brick and mortar's requirement. Pastor preaching, that was in the Bible. We see that, but not in a weekly gathering thing, and that's not how they did it early on. So I've had to go back in my own life and go, okay, what does it look like to be a follower of Jesus, walking with God? I go back to Genesis 5:10, Enoch. It says Enoch walked with God, and he was no more because God took him. So I've got these 7 things that I've just built over the last 35 years. I'm like, these are so good. Spell the walking acrostic. Super easy. I just ask myself this question. Am I worshiping God? And here I mean, the Greek word proskuneo is mentioned more than the other 9 words for worship in the Bible, and it's really to give your life to a gospel cause. Here I'm talking about worshiping God corporately through singing, approaching God daily in prayer, L, loving other Christians through biblical fellowship, K, knowing the Word of God. I, investing your fiscal and physical resources. I don't know how else to say that, in the kingdom of God. N, nurturing non-believers or nurturing people along in their faith. And G, giving your life in service to the gospel cause. And so when I look at that model, I go, okay, do I need brick and mortar to do that? No. But do I need the church to do that? Yes. So we need to redefine. I attend a local church where I am not a member. I attend it, I would say at this point in my journey, I attend it more than I don't, but I'm not plugged into the actual local church body. I run my own Christian men's service every Wednesday night. I lead a ministry. I mean, I do a lot of the things, right? But we still haven't defined church. So we need to define church here, because these guys are going, what the heck are these guys talking about? So I've got a definition of church that's kind of working in my brain. How would you define church? Like, we know it's not brick and mortar. We know it's not a pastor. We know it's not membership. You've said those things, but how would we define church? Like, how would you define it?
I mean, I think the definition is fellowship, worship, prayer, the word, in community.
Okay, so earlier I introduced you as a lot of things. I introduced you as a guy that goes to a home. We're involved in the same home Bible study, home group. I don't know what you want to call our group. We've got 9 couples. And let's talk about this. We meet when do we meet? Sunday nights.
Sunday night.
Let's talk about what do we do. Give me last week's agenda. Just go with last week, just to give us a point of reference for our listeners.
Yeah, we always start with a blessing over the food.
A blessing, breaking of bread together. How do we eat?
We eat, all the men eat in one area and the women eat in another, so that they can have open dialogue or whatever's
Fellowship?
going on. Fellowship, for sure.
It's usually, unless we're talking about, stupid guy stuff, it's usually biblical.
Which usually there is, whether it's you or me or maybe Wes, there is a very pointed, how are you doing?
Yes.
Like, what's going on? Get real about what's going on in your life. Which is not like a nosy thing. It's let me come alongside you with whatever you're going through.
And it's not a judgmental thing. And Daniel, our podcast producer, he's in the group.
Yeah.
He's sitting right over there. So all 3 of us are involved in the same group.
Yeah. So we do that. We have a time of sharing, and then usually we're reminded by the girls to let's get going, quick cleanup, and then we go open our Bibles.
Bible study.
Yeah.
Is there a pastor preaching?
No, but there is somebody who leads typically.
But is he leading by teaching?
No, just question asking.
Okay, well, I'm that guy. I don't even really. You are that guy, or I'm that guy. It's an expository journey. It's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I don't do a lot of prep. I'm not upstanding. It is in a brick and mortar building.
Well,
but nobody pays for it. Except for the person that lives in it with us. It's in our homes. So we do reading it. We study the Word. We just finished. We went First Peter this year. We finished Jude, and now we're in 2 Peter. We're going verse by verse.
Yeah.
So we're grinding through it. What happens after the Bible study? Well, you missed one this week. We did something this week that was before the Bible study.
What? That's my bad. We worshipped. We sang a song together. Sean played the guitar, which was awesome.
I think we should do that every week. I really personally love it.
Huge fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did worship. It's hugely impactful.
Okay, worship, Bible study, then what?
Then what I think is, I don't want to say that it's the most important, but to me it feels like it has the greatest impact on our lives, is we pray.
Okay, so let me ask this question. Let's go back to my walking acrostic. Let's weigh my walking. We haven't prepared this, by the way. This is a wing it and fling it moment, but I feel like this is a God thing that I think will help you guys a lot. So let's take my walking acrostic, which I think I'm pretty close to. That is a disciple. And let's weigh it against Sunday night. Did we worship?
Yes.
Did we approach God in prayer?
100%.
Were we loving each other?
Yep.
Were we knowing the Word of God?
We were.
Were we investing our resources in God's kingdom? Now think about this. Well, now think about it.
We bought some food.
We all brought meals, but there wasn't an offering. So we may or may not have done that. N, did we nurture each other in our faith?
Yes.
G, were we giving our lives in Christian service to each other?
We were.
I would say yeah. So So then here's the hard part. Biblically, based on your definition of fellowship, community, prayer, worship, and reading the word, based on my walking acrostic, biblically would the Apostle Paul call that a church? Would Jesus call that a church? Would that represent John 13:34? This is how they will know that you're my disciples. Would Hebrews 10:23 and 24, let us spur one another on to good deeds, let us not forsake gathering together as some are in the habit of doing? Would all of these things point to a biblical model of the church?
Are you asking my opinion?
Yeah, I am.
I think 100%.
So essentially, I would say you contradicted your earliest question, but not really. You contradicted it in the fact that you don't have an affinity to the church, but then the caveat was brick and mortar and pastor preaching. So I would argue, or I would ask you, do you have an affinity to the real church, the biblical church? Well, I mean, your problem is the structured, organized church.
Yeah, so the reason I brought it up is because, I mean, I've wrestled with it for 12 years, and I think I've done enough reading and prayer. I think I stand in a good place with it, how I feel. Whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know that, but I think I've unpacked it enough. I haven't left it in the wind and just not worried about it. But the reason I brought it up is because I think more and more, with all of the distractions, all of the busyness, all of the things and the challenges that life has in store for you on a day-to-day basis, I think a lot of men hang on to the idea that I can navigate all of those things and get through all of those things because of Sunday, because of Sunday morning, because I'm going to throw a few pennies in the offering plate, I'm going to raise my hand in worship, I'm going to be very contrite in prayer, I'm going to listen to the word and hopefully be a doer of the word, and that's what's going to get me through this. And I personally challenge that. I don't think that is enough, and I don't think that's the definition when in Hebrews, when they're saying get together and spur each other on. Yeah. I don't think he means Sunday morning, me personally, right? Just by the dialogue we've had. So the reason I bring it up is that I know where I'm at, but there might be a lot of people that listen to this and me being prayerful about today and Lord, what's on my heart that might help somebody else? What is something that I'm dealing with that through my experiences and Jim sharing with me what he thinks is the right way, biblically sound advice, what is something I'm doing that could help somebody else if we talked about it? And that's why I brought it up.
I think the key thing, the key Achilles heel in the home church model, the way we do it, is the kids aren't allowed to come. And here's my thought on that. If we're called to manage our households well, which we're told in 1 Timothy 3, the word there is proistomai, and it talks about building a wall. It talks about, being this rampart. So the big question I have, you're an empty nester, I'm an empty nester. For these guys with kids in the home, that still leaves them hanging with their discipleship of their children and their wife. Maybe not so much their wife. So this is where the pushback would be, right? Yep. This is what the church, because I do believe in the local church, the brick and mortar building. I don't think she functioned well a lot of times. I was at a church for 11 years that really, really did. But I do think there is a use for her. And I do think that with some of these parents that have young children, I think if we just go to the biblical model and we go to this walking acrostic, they'll have to figure this out. And here's the other thing that is really interesting. I have found that a lot of guys, you're not one of them, but a lot of guys that aren't plugged into any kind of fellowship or body, they're not givers and they're not serving. They're self-serving, and so they're missing it. So my pushback to you guys would be, okay, so you're not involved in a local church and you're not even involved in a local community of fellowship, which we would define as a church. Yeah. My question is, where are you worshiping God and paying him homage? Where are you approaching God daily in prayer? That one's easy, guys. You know it. How about loving other believers? You're not doing it. You just admitted to it. I heard you. Okay, are you in the Word? You're probably in the Word. That's easy. You're listening to the Word right here. We're in the Word right now. Are you investing your fiscal resources in the kingdom? Well, if not, go to menarena.org. We can help you with that, so you won't have as much guilt, right? We're just here to help. We're just here to help. Are you bringing people along in the faith? Are you nurturing other believers? And are you giving your life to the gospel cause and service? So we've got to weigh those 7 things with what the Bible talks about church, and we've got to weigh it against your definition of church, which I thought was beautiful. Fellowship, community, the word, prayer, worship. I mean, I think that was kind of the 5, right? Because I think so there's a lot a guy has to weigh in, and then he's got to weigh in with the place he's at in his life.
You brought up a really good point about the kids, because in all of it, with I think how well I'm leading my marriage and how well I'm trying to live my life, it was easy to justify in my mind for the reasoning we've been talking about. But the hanging point that I kept coming to is am I serving my children correctly? And so I had to dig deep and work hard to make sure that my children were being spiritually fed in some form or fashion. And we did that through a daily Bible study that I send them every morning, full check-in, full worship music.
The parachurch helped you with your kids, Young Life?
Young Life has helped a lot, making sure that they're plugged into the right avenues, constant connection, and not just connection, like not connection like how was your day today, even though that was important, but every time that I'm doing the check-in, I'm trying to make sure that the check-in is through the lens of Jesus. And making sure that there's no mistaking the why and the how and the what in our family is all through that lens. And so I had to work really hard, maybe more than somebody who was, their kids are plugged into some youth group or doing something different. I had to be really intentional about making sure that they had avenues, especially within our house, where they could speak freely, they could talk freely, and they could experience some of those church-type definitions that we created, conversationally, worship-wise, prayer, whatever. So I probably had to work a little bit harder at that because of my we don't need to go to church. I'm not into that.
It's really interesting. As you were talking, I said, oh man, but what you're talking takes so much more work. And then you said, and I think that's the tension, right? There's a tension because I think these guys are in the stress bubble. They're unlike you and I right now. I mean, you're a business owner. You've got dozens of employees. Your kids are in college now, so you're putting them through college. There's a stress of its own. But these guys are in the middle of raising these young kids up. And I think the key in the stress bubble for a lot of these guys is what can I do to make me just as effective with less work? So there is a tension there. And I'm not saying one is good or bad. I'm just saying you've got to make sure that you do those 7 things to be a disciple. You've got to make sure that you're involved in something that you create that's called the church, whatever that looks like, and that you bring your kids along. And I think what we're deciding here is if the brick and mortar doesn't work for you, you're going to have more work to do it the other way, but it can still be done.
Well, I mean, for me, it's like, it's real or it's not. Jesus.
Okay.
It's either some contrived BS thing that we've all convinced ourselves that man, this feels good and this is the right thing, or it's real.
Yep.
And if it's real to you, then you need to dig in and do the work, okay? You need to get in the Word. You need to do the worship. You need to give. You need to serve. You need to be the man.
Get in the arena and get it done.
Get in the arena. And that's being the best husband you can be.
Yep.
That's being the best father you can be. It's not just doing it at a cup of coffee with your buddy. It's actually doing the work. And I think where men are missing the mark, and people that are in my circle of influence that I'm constantly trying to plod along or help or nurture, is, guys, it's bigger than this. If you don't believe, fine.
Yep.
But if you believe, then quit being passive and weak sauce. Get after it.
Yep.
And, if you're not going to go to church, you better be doing something.
Well, here's the problem. Here's the problem. And I've had to redirect this all the time. I run into people all the time. How you doing? Good. How you doing spiritually? I need to start going to church. What does that have to do with anything? I said, how are you doing spiritually? Like, how are you doing with Jesus? Like, church, I believe church, how we kind of defined it, is important. It's vital. But it's not about church. It's about, is Jesus a piece of your life? Is he a Sunday morning hour-long slice? You know, we're coming up on Easter. We're going to have the CEOs from all over the country coming, Christian, Christmas, Easter only. They're going to be showing up because they think that that's their way in. And God is not interested to be a part of your life. He wants all of your life. And I think that's really what we're talking about today is we are talking a lot about church and what that looks like and how we define it. But really, if you walk that back, if you reverse engineer that thing, it really comes down to, I mean, are you really a follower of Jesus? You know, or are you a church attending guy sometimes? Like, how do you define what a Christian is? Because Jesus never called us to make decisions. It's just not in the Bible. He called us to make disciples. Yeah. And so, man, this has been a great conversation. I didn't know you were going to bring this in, so I thought, oh man, this is interesting. But I think it's an issue a lot of guys are wrestling with. Do you have any closing thoughts?
I think if you take one thing away from some of the stuff that I'm wrestling with and what Jim and I were kind of unpacking a little bit, is that sometimes what, you know, grandma says or what social media says or wanting to belong to something or a fear of missing out is not always at the heart of what Jesus would want from you in your life. There's a chance you're going to be led astray. And there's value in all the things that Jim and I were talking about that are so critical and vital to your growth spiritually. But don't deceive yourselves by thinking that a Sunday morning or going to some pretty church and looking fancy and listen to some cool guy speak and he's the new hip and cool thing, that is all that faith is supposed to be. And so I found my place in it, and I know other people can too, but I've never taken an easy road. And so for you guys out there that are maybe wrestling with the same thing, you need to really challenge yourself, and you need to pray about it and allow God to do the work in your life, because just going to Sunday morning and listening to a guy and never cracking open the Bible and praying about it and let God speak to your own heart, I just don't think is the way. So be encouraged by it if you can, and don't be weak sauce. Get after it.
Don't be weak sauce. Man, what a great conversation. I didn't know what you were going to come in with today, and that it didn't throw me for a loop, but I thought it would be something different. So I really appreciate today's conversation, man.
Well, you are one of the people in my life that I would sit down with and genuinely listen to about this, because you're walking it. You know what I mean? Like what you're saying and what you're doing to me has value. You're not just some dude out there BSing. You know, you're trying to really get to the heart of all and help others, and that's why I would do it.
I appreciate that. Well, you know, that's really why I love the Average Joe interviews so much, because these are friends. You're a friend. We're your friend. We do life together. We're in a church together. I think there's something to that when people come into the room and you get they see you eyeball to eyeball and they do life with you. You can't screw that up on social media. That is what it is. It's the blood and guts of reality. And so, guys, I hope today's episode helped you. Man, our job is to push you through that stress bubble, lead you through it, and to help you and those you love come out closer to Jesus, because when a man gets it, everyone wins. Until next time, feel the wet sand on the arena floor, hear the deafening roar of the crowd, taste the sweetness of victory, smell the stench of battle, get in the game, get dirty, grind it out, go to Jesus, and go to church, and be a man.